it's always so much easier for the non-believer to be with the believer than it is the believer to be with the non-believer, because for him, he was changing nothing. And I bent over backwards to justify my relationship with him.
Hello, my name is Brenda Mata, and welcome to the Fearless Calling podcast. This is a podcast where we focus on encouraging Christian women of all ages to fearlessly pursue their God-given calling. Today is part 2 of our previous podcast, where we have 3 special guests, Morgan Jones, Anneliese Molina, and my sweet mama, Brenda Mata. In the previous episode, I asked these ladies to come on and talk about toxic relationships and the importance of being equally yoked. Today, we will finish answering the questions, and the ladies will continue to share on how, as Christians, we can laugh without fear of the future because of God's grace in our lives. Ladies, welcome back to the podcast, and thank you for joining me for a part 2.
Thank you for having us again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
Now we're going to head into the second part of our questions. So, ladies, what are some red flags that you ladies saw now looking back and being out of those relationships?
Well, I'll go first again because I just love to talk. No, but well, the first red flag was that he wasn't a believer. That one I ignored right off the bat. But he charmed me. What can I say? I was also very young when we got together, so I have to have grace with myself and remember that I thought I was, you always think you're so mature when you're younger and you think you know everything, and then think of the other people that are your age that think they're mature, aren't mature, and you're like, but I'm not like that. And that was me. And as a 23-year-old woman now, looking back whenever I was so young, you just really, I have to have grace with myself, but also I could have maybe been a little more honest with myself too. So yeah, first red flag was that he was just not a believer. Another, this was kind of, I don't know, my relationship was different because my ex was he was a good person. That's what was annoying. He was a good person, and that's why leaving that relationship was hard, because I remember laying in bed so many nights and just crying because I kept thinking if he would just believe in the Lord, I could meet, this could be him. This could be my future husband. This could be the man of my future kids. Yeah. But I always knew the truth that he wasn't. And we had a lot of conversation about that, and he was so kind, and he would say, well, I'm willing to go to church with you. Okay, that's amazing, but that doesn't mean you believe in the Lord. Yeah. And he would say, well, if you feel like reading your Bible, I'll be with you while you read it. Also, yes. And I do remember there were some times where I would read my Bible out loud with him, but it was like falling on deaf ears. Not only the problem was with him was that he wasn't, and this was a red flag, he wasn't just like an agnostic who didn't really fully understand. He was an atheist. He was resistant to the Lord's calling. He was resistant to anything that had to do with religion as a whole. It didn't just lie within Christianity. He was did not believe in any of that. And so that was probably a red flag too, just that he was so, and it's like, oh, give him the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't know, but he could have known better. So anyway, all in all, there were red flags, but they were kind of easy to ignore. I think that's true for a lot of girls who are in relationships that they shouldn't be in. Yep. You just ignore the giant red flags because
the big red siren.
You want to, first of all. That was the first thing I recognized in myself. I didn't want to be honest with myself. I didn't want to. Yes. I just did whatever I wanted, and it was not to, feel convicted, and it was to continue the relationship that, I knew wasn't pleasing to the Lord. And so I did, and I did for way too long. And so that's stuff that, I still pray about even to this day, because I don't want to be put in that position again where I have to sacrifice my own beliefs for what, a guy?
Yeah.
A man? I don't think so. So, but it's definitely very important to, I think, pray about that kind of stuff because, and I prayed a lot whenever I was in that relationship. Even though I knew, and this is the thing, like, oh, I pray that the Lord would, find, call him to him and be, open his heart to the truth of the scriptures. And, but that's not up to me.
Yeah.
And it's not up to him, but it was like, it just was never going to be what I wanted it to be. And I had to recognize that. And so, but cycling back to what you actually asked, blaring red flags. Yes. That he was an atheist. And that he also did not, sometimes he did not respect that I actually was a believer. Because I don't talk about that a lot, but there were times where, I'd be like texting, oh, I'm in church. And he's like, well, can't you just leave? I'm like, well, that's not really how that works. I'm first of all in church, so I'm not gonna get up and walk out. Yeah.
I came here for a reason.
Right. But also draw me into sin and stuff like that, which was something that I battled with as well. Like, we just did not make good decisions sometimes, and it was really easy to ignore that, my aching heart, and ignore what the Lord was trying to tell me, because he had none of it. He didn't believe in any of it. And there were also, in the regards to boundaries set as a Christian woman, he had no boundaries as an atheist man. Yeah. That's the thing. And so it wasn't that he didn't necessarily respect my boundaries. It's that he wouldn't.
His moral code was different.
It's just different. And so we would settle on different, like on different stones. Just, he believed this, I believed that. But then when I was always the one that had to
compromise.
Yeah. And he never had to compromise. What did he have to compromise about? So it's always so much easier for the non-believer to be with the believer than it is the believer to be with the non-believer, because for him, he was changing nothing. And I bent over backwards to justify my relationship with him. And so I think that even if it's not one of those red flags that's like, oh, that's atrocious, there are just many things that I definitely should have just understood. And one of the things that really bothered me was the boundaries. Yeah. So,
yeah. Well, what about you, Morgan?
Well, there was a lot.
Yeah, there were.
I didn't really see a lot of red flags until about 3 months in. So I was thinking of more specific ones that I saw. One was that he would just throw fits out of the blue. When I wouldn't do something with him or for him, he didn't, completely isolate me from my friends or my family. But he was very disrespectful of them and their opinions, especially my parents and my family. But he would just get mad about random things and would skip his classes because he had migraines all the time, and he had a punctured lung in high school. And so that was often a crutch that he would use. And so I would joke later out of the relationship that I was more of his nurse than his girlfriend.
Nice.
Because he just wanted me to do things for him all the time. And anytime, I would try to stand my ground and say, no, I have my responsibilities, my schedule, my people, these things going on. Then, of course, he would try to make me feel guilty by telling me how awful he feels physically and that he's sick and, cry me a river. So then I was made to feel really guilty about that. And sometimes I just didn't put up with it, depending on how dramatic it was. And I was like, you're just being a child and you'll get over it. And eventually he would, of course, because he'd try to win me over again to be on good terms to then use me, And he would ghost me for a day or two, and he would throw me a fit if I got upset that he wasn't responding to me, like I mentioned earlier. And so I would try to text him and he just wouldn't respond. And we did have each other's locations, but sometimes it wouldn't load. And I was always suspicious of that. I just never trusted him. And so even though he was pushing boundaries, I didn't want to separate when we were together in person because I didn't really know when I'd see him again. So that was our time to hang out.
That is crazy.
And so it would just, get longer and longer. And I would think, man, I really need to go do homework. But like, I just felt, I didn't realize that was feeling insecure, not really realizing that's what it was. And he wouldn't, especially with pushing physical boundaries, that was definitely the biggest thing and the biggest change. But he made it seem like that was just the next progression, like that is just the
it's
subtle.
Normal.
Oh, it's such a natural thing to do.
Yeah, it's just what you do.
Yeah.
Yes. And that it was something that I wanted when in reality it wasn't. And I even told him that in the beginning. And I did not even let him kiss me for a long time. But he would just ask and ask and ask. But he would wait a while. And so then it made it seem like, oh, I think we're there now, like this is just where we're going. So then it didn't seem so bad, And when I finally let him, I thought, we had kind of talked about some boundaries that we would set, and he agreed to them. And so what was strange was how subtly he started to push that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden not agree to the boundaries we set.
Yes, ma'am.
And I said, well, I thought that was a mutual decision, but apparently not. And so that was also kind of threw me in for a loop for a while. And he wouldn't really indicate that that's where he wanted things to go when we were together in person until we were actually together. Yeah. And so I would think, we're just going to go out and do something really innocent until he started pushing things. And I'd be like, well, that's not why I wanted to hang out with you. I wanted to have quality time and build a solid relationship. And I guess that's not what you're wanting. And so then that got pretty confusing. And so he would when I would stop things from going too far, he would throw a really big fit, like even physically, not like at me, but he would just, like the way he would shift in his chair. I mean, he was like throwing a fit like a child and would
like
raise
an actual tantrum.
Yeah. Basically. And it's laughable to think about now that's just so childish and dramatic. And that would make me just, leave him right then and be like, well, if you're going to act like that, then I'm not doing that. But when you are close with somebody, it's easy to say that from the outside or in hindsight. But when you're in the moment, it's really personal and it's really hurtful too. And so with my feelings being hurt, well, I just want to, make you happy or just keep you from exploding for one, or going off and, telling everybody lies about me or something, which is what he did after we broke up. And lots of people stopped talking to me and started judging me and that kind of thing. And so just the ways that he would try and manipulate me. And even in the end, the night that we broke up, he actually turned his phone on airplane mode so that I couldn't see his location. And he went with the student director from one of the ministry teams here, and they went out drinking and got drunk in Quincy. And she was actually the one person that I told him I was uncomfortable with him hanging out with alone. And so then finding out that they actually spent the night together, but nothing happened, so they say, which doesn't matter, obviously. But they had gotten drunk and spent the night together months and months prior, which I didn't know that until this situation. And so I say that instance because he just threw the biggest fit when I called him out on it, because I found out from someone else. They texted me and said, hey, I just want you to know this is where they are. And I'm assuming you don't know that. And I said, no, thanks for letting me know. And so I called him and I chewed him out because I was done at that point. And honestly, I'd been praying, Lord, you know exactly what's going on. You know how unhealthy this is and how not good this is for me spiritually. And I need a way out, but I need a way out that doesn't make it my fault.
Yeah.
Like where he
Like
knows
it's so
that it
obvious.
yes,
Yeah.
almost like you're just releasing me out of it. And that was it, because he threw the biggest fit, and because of his dumb lung, he decides to go for a run. And he's like, well, on the phone, we're talking. And he just throws a fit and he goes, well, I'm just going to run. So he goes for a run and he's like, I'm just going to run until my lung collapses.
Oh my god!
And then, you know,
Oh
you're,
my
I guess, going to
word.
have to deal with me dying over this or
Yep.
something like
No, he
that.
didn't.
And yeah,
He needed a pity party.
Yeah.
he did. And he started crying and he said, I just want to go to church with you tomorrow and all this stuff. And I said, no, I'm not going with you. But I heard the panic in his voice.
Yes.
And that was actually really good for me, because I thought, you're just panicked because you've wanted to have sex with me all this time and I wouldn't let you. And now I'm done. And so
Yes.
you can't get that from me. And so that was a huge moment of seeing the fits kind of come to the end, where I saw it for what it was, and it was a lot more obvious. But they were very subtle beforehand. So yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to several of those. Morgan and I always say it's so strange that the Lord put us through Lord didn't put us through, but we walked through two very similar relationships. Mine was just strewn out a lot more and not a lot less obvious, I feel like, at least in the beginning. And Mom, you can chime in, because I don't remember. That's one thing I talk about, is I just don't remember a whole lot from my last relationship. But the thing about the lung, my ex did that about driving his car. He would send me videos of him driving over 100 miles an hour on the interstate and saying, I'm just so depressed or something like that. And I was like, what you're being is dumb, because you're not going to blame me for you speeding and getting in a car accident over something that's going on. And
Talk about manipulation.
Right.
I mean, that is like first class kind of manipulation.
yeah,
It is, and many times when he would send those videos, of course I would see them every time, and I would tell her, this is so wrong. He's trying to control you. And he would say to her through the text, well, I'll just jerk the wheel.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were so many different circumstances. I think so many of the red flags were the lack of support. One of the other reasons he didn't want me to go to college was he didn't want me to be smarter than him, which I think is so childish looking
So
back
immature.
now. He's just not supportive. He was not supportive. The constant questioning if I was cheating, when I never gave him an excuse to think I was cheating. There were just so many different, like I said, I really don't remember a whole lot about that relationship, just because I chose to move on. And I am one of those people that forgives and forgets. And that's good and that's bad, because I think that's one of the reasons I stayed so long, is I would forget the terrible things he would do, and then someone would bring it up and I'd be like, why am I still with you? Because that's horrible.
Yeah.
But also, like, the jealousy. He was so jealous about the time I spent with my mom, and then when I got my dog, he was so jealous of my dog. He was like,
is
you're
weird.
just
So
spending so much time with your dog.
Psychopathic kind of
I
scary.
know, it's
like
just
being jealous
weird.
of a dog. Let's be for real for a moment.
Yeah.
What did the dog do to you?
It's a cute dog. Yeah, and I don't know, there was so many different things. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But
Well, I can.
yeah, all three of you, walked through this with me.
First of all, the way he talked to you was a red flag.
Oh, yeah.
Because
That's
he
right.
never respected you whenever you were breaking up or were going through he never respected you.
Oh, no.
And the way that he would text you was horrifying. He would text you and try to manipulate you. And why are you talking to that kid? Oh, what, do you like him more than me?
Yeah.
Like, he couldn't hang out with any man.
No one. It wasn't
No.
just men, but
No.
and it was horrible. Like, one time he came and picked me up on campus, and I had met with Riley and one other guy about a meeting for something, and we had walked out of the student center, and he goes, what, is that your campus boyfriend? were you hanging out with your campus boyfriend? Is that why you're trying to, you know, walk
Wow.
separate ways and act like you weren't together? And it was like, are you kidding me? And I told him, and he said it was a joke. And I said, I've already told you how that makes me feel because you've already said that you think I cheated with this guy, even though I proved to you, I had proof that I didn't cheat on you. And the fact that you still harp on this and you still think it's a quote unquote joke, when you know that's hurting someone's feelings and they bring it to you and say, hey, this doesn't feel right, I don't appreciate this, that means to stop. It doesn't mean to keep doing it all the time. And it made me break down all the time because I was like, if you think I'm a cheater, why the heck are you with me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and another thing, whenever you were on campus, he would come to campus and insist that you come out to his car, stop what you're doing when he knew you were studying for exams.
It was almost always like clockwork. It was always finals.
Was.
Finals or midterms.
Finals, he demanded your time, demanded it.
Well, and it was because what would happen was with midterms and finals, and if you're a college student, you 1,000% understand this, but you are so crazy busy studying for those exams. And a lot of times you have papers, final presentations, exams, all this stuff coming up, and you literally have maybe a week to prepare for it. And I would spend time with him quite a lot, like almost every day for multiple hours a day. And keep in mind, he wasn't in college and he worked a 9-to-3 job. So it wasn't like he had like stuff going on, you know, or was, you know, I don't know. But I remember just being like, hey, I have a lot going on next week. We're not going to be able to hang out because I have so much studying to do. And I've kind of been putting it off till this week, and it's my last week. I need to take time away to do that. And he would get upset, and he would turn his words on me, and he would say, well, someone told me a long time ago that if you love someone, you'll make time for them. Mm. And I was like, I did make time for you, and I am making time for you. I'm saying up until this day, and then after this day, we can hang out. But right now, I have to study, and college has to be important.
Because that's never enough for him.
Right.
No. Yeah.
And it's not like he could just come and you can study with him. It was never like that either.
No.
He wouldn't let you do that.
No. And it was just a mess. But there were so many red flags, and I don't want to get into all of them because we would be here for days. But
a long time.
But I do want to say, like Anneliese said, the lack of respect
yeah.
was so hard to watch.
Yeah.
I kept telling Brenda, there's a Jacob out there somewhere for you.
Yeah.
I always tried to take her back to a biblical example.
Yeah.
And was like, he is nothing like Jacob. That man would not even drive 15 minutes to spend 1 hour with you because it was just an hour. I knew young men who would walk for 2 hours to spend 15 minutes with a young lady because they respected him and liked them that much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and the Lord has been amazing in giving me a man that is so different from my ex.
Same.
With the amount of support I get with, like, he's so proud of me. And he always jokes about me being the smart one in the relationship. He's like, I don't know how you do it. Like, just hearing about the work that you have to go through stresses me out. And he's like, and he's just so supportive. And just the amount, of encouragement I get from him is crazy. But also the amount of time I get with this man. Like, this man works 16-hour shifts overnight almost every day of the week, and the one day he gets off work, he comes, sees me, spends 8 hours with me, goes home, sleeps, and starts the whole cycle over again.
Because you're a priority to him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And it's crazy. Like, it really is crazy in the moment when you're in a relationship like that, where it's toxic and it's not good and you're scared and you're worried, Lord, is there better for me? I want more. Like, your soul is literally crying out for more. You want more. And when you walk out of that and you say, Lord, I'm going to trust you, and then he brings someone else into your life that is so opposite of what you were in, you're like, wow, like, the Lord, he's faithful. And it's hard to understand that when you're in something so hard like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything to add?
I just feel like sometimes it feels like the Lord's just waiting, saying,
Yeah.
come on, Brenda, Anneliese, Morgan, Brenda, whomever. Just let go of what you think you want in this world and turn to me. And when you do finally let go, that's when you,
Well, there were so many times that you would actually say that. You would say, Brenda, God's waiting for you to let go, and you're not letting go.
Yes.
Right. And a lot of times, people say, oh, well, when I was finally content in the Lord, then suddenly this perfect man appeared. And, oftentimes, or a lot of times, that doesn't happen. That does not happen right away.
No.
And sometimes it takes a while, and God is still sanctifying and pruning, and either you're not ready or whoever he is not ready. And because, it's in his timing that instead, when you're finally content in the Lord, you're just content and you just want to be with him, and that suddenly having a man doesn't matter quite as much.
Well,
absolutely.
and something else that's important to remember is that as a Christian woman, your first priority is to be a Christian.
Yes.
Your first priority is the Lord. It's your relationship with the Lord. And even if you're in a relationship, if you're single, if you're in a complicated situation, your first priority is still the Lord.
Yes.
And so you have to listen to him, and because that's what he tells you to do, first of all. And it's also true that, you don't have to go through terrible things to find the one that you're going to end up with forever, or find the one that the Lord has designed for you, which unfortunately a lot of women do go through awful things before they do end up with the man that they're supposed to be with, who the Lord has designed for them. But, just realizing that the Lord has a plan for everyone, and he always uses, a lot of evil for good is what he has done for ages and ages. And so it's just, not just have hope, but have faith. And have faith that the Lord will be faithful to you, because he keeps his promises, and he always has a plan for your life, and also for, who you are going to be. Yeah. And if that's you going to be with another person, that's wonderful. If that's what you want, that's what you're praying for. But, let his will be done is the first and foremost thing.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, and you never know. He may still be preparing that heart of that man that he wants for you.
Yeah.
So be patient.
Yeah.
Trust and obey.
Everything, to those who love the Lord, everything works out for good, whether it's evil or it's good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to ask one last question, since we are definitely going over time. But what would you say to someone going through a similar relationship?
I have several things. When I broke up with my ex-boyfriend, I really didn't have to set a lot of boundaries for myself or do much, work on me, because the work was done, and the Lord had already done that in the end of that relationship, because it really just solidified my standards. It made me really blunt. I did go through a lot of anxiety and depression after that time, just recovering from the relationship, but it also made me really confident in that it didn't matter if a guy liked me or not. If everyone on campus or my friends were judging me, I did not care anymore. I did not care what people thought, because the Lord knew. He knew my heart in the situation, and I had gotten out of it, and through conviction of the Holy Spirit, and I'm so thankful for that. But I was no longer willing to settle. I just was not. I was not going to do that. And I actually had a guy before my husband that expressed feelings for me, and he was a believer, and I really did like him. But he did not want the same things as me. He didn't want to go overseas the way that I did. Our lives were not going in the same direction, and he just wanted to go ahead and date and see how it went. And it was hard to say no, because he was a really great guy, but I thought, you know what, that's not where we're going in life. I know that we would always be arguing about that. I just know that you're not right for me. And so it was so much easier to say no to other situations like that, because I had already learned from my experience that it was worth it to wait and not just get into a different relationship just to see how it goes, And especially when it comes to sexual assault, if that has happened to anybody else, getting into the relationship, saying yes to that person to date them, there is responsibility that like all three of us have in that. And we've repented for our sin in those relationships.
Yeah.
But past that, the sexual assault in and of itself, I had to learn and heal and realize that that was not my fault. What he did to me was not my fault. And I can't just wallow and drown in the shame of that, but instead accepting the Lord's grace and allowing him to heal me and draw me into a closer relationship with him because of that. And just an encouragement that the godly, good guys still exist.
Yes, they do.
Even if they're not around here. There were not very many of them in my college experience at all, which we kind of all agree on.
Yeah.
But they do exist, and they won't make you feel like how we've described in these relationships. They won't make you feel like you're too clingy, like you're too much. They won't shame you and punish you and manipulate you and not make you feel like you can have their location or, just silly things like that. They won't make you feel like you can't trust them or be honest with them or be vulnerable with them. And, I have a very godly husband who makes me feel wonderful, and Brenda will also experience that pretty soon, even just in an engagement. You can already tell the same things that I'm experiencing, that you just feel completely different, and that there is still hope.
There is.
That these guys do exist, and that it's not the end of the world, and there's so much more than just obsessing over the past and our experiences.
Yep, for sure.
Well, something I want to say is that I am currently single. So that at first was hard because I thought, well, I'm giving up such a good thing. And for what? Well, to have an actual relationship with the Lord, for one. And so that was something that was my first priority. But I can say that to all of those who are in a relationship that is a positive relationship but not glorifying to the Lord, it is not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not worth your eternal soul to be with a cute guy or to be with a guy who is just averagely okay. And because, even though I'm single now, I'd rather be single for the rest of my life than to live in sin, actively live in sin. We're all sinners, but I choose to not be in that position. And it's not that I haven't had opportunities. There's been other guys who have, asked me out or have shown interest that, they don't meet my standards of being a heavenly, God-centered man.
Yeah.
And so, and I know what it's like to fall into that. And so that's just something that I have to be firm on. And so, if you're in a relationship that you wouldn't even consider toxic, because I don't really consider my past relationship toxic. But then, there's things about it that were, but as a whole, it still was not glorifying to the Lord. And because of the way in which it was just, with how he was, and not every guy is the same or anything like that, but even though he was a great guy, that didn't mean that it was a great relationship.
Yeah.
And just remember that, because, they can be a great person. He can be a great guy. That doesn't mean you're going to get in a good situation or anything like that. So, and just honestly have faith in yourself too, because you're going to go through a lot of it by yourself.
Yeah.
Because whenever you break up with somebody who isn't a believer, you have to remember why you're doing that, because the Lord is the most important person that you need to be prioritizing. He's the most important thing that you have to commit to. And so, it's like, okay, I get lonely, I get a little sad, but I know that he's prepared a room for me. And that's what's so important.
Well, and it shows a lot about your relationship with the Lord to be bold enough to stand by the gospel.
Oh, and be bold enough.
Yes.
Because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. And it was so hard to break up with somebody who loved me when I loved them.
Yeah.
And that was one of the worst things that I went through, was actively ending a relationship when we both loved each other, but I loved the Lord more.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to. And it was so hard, and I cried so much. But, you know, I'm in a better place. I'm in a better place with the Lord. And there is no better feeling than answering the Lord's call and finally feeling the harsh, you know, he convicted me a lot in that relationship. And conviction isn't always the best feeling, because you feel you feel the kind of shame that you went through. At least I did. Because there was a lot of shame in my relationship because I actively ignored his call. I actively ignored him telling me to end it.
Yeah.
And I think I had to pray about that, you know, ask him for forgiveness for me ignoring him, because I did. And knowing that he did, you know, the Lord forgives, and he always will. That's the thing. And so it's been better. It's just better to say no to that relationship than it is to say no to the relationship you have with the Lord.
Yeah.
Has to be your first priority.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a really good reminder, even though you don't see that relationship as toxic. Just because a guy is good by the world's standards does not mean he is right by the Lord's standards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it hurt a lot to realize that too. Like, it was really hard to realize, oh my gosh, but he is so great, and he does kind of, well, you know, there are things about him that are so good. And but you're right. I mean, that doesn't mean that that's the one that the Lord has called me to be with. So
well, and when we talk about the Lord being our treasure, I think a situation like that finally makes it tangible.
Yes,
Yes.
it does.
You know, that when you love the Lord that much and you want him to be your ultimate delight and treasure, then he is so worth it. He's too worth it
And
to be in a relationship
I'm so
like
glad
that.
you said that, because something else that I want to encourage you young women about is the Lord Jesus came and was the ultimate sacrifice for your heart, for your soul, for your eternal being. He died on that cross for you specifically, and you can sacrifice an ungodly relationship for him. I mean, it's just true. You can, and I have, and we all have, and women will not just women, but, you know, men too. It's like he died for you.
Yeah.
So,
and also, without giving too many specifics, one of the most encouraging things I've ever read that I would like to recommend is a book called Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland, and I rave about it and tell everybody about it that I can. And I didn't read that until a couple years after the relationship ended. But it just talks about the Father's heart, and I would love to go on and on about it, but it's just one of the most encouraging things I've ever read, and I think would give a lot of healing and perspective on this subject in particular, that I would have anyone read it, especially young women.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would encourage anyone going through this situation to trust the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Because I stayed with him for so long throughout the conviction, and it led to severe anxiety and panic attacks. It led to illness. It led to a lot of things because my soul was so grieved with what I was knowingly doing. And I suffered, my friendships suffered, my relationships with everyone pretty much around me who cared about me suffered. But also people in my life who didn't know what was going on and were praising how we looked together or we just looked so happy. If someone's telling you that and they really don't see what's going on, don't take it as encouragement. Because I did. And those are not the people who are investing in your life and are there for you and helping you. Those are just people that are passing in and out of your life. They really don't know what's going on. And you need to trust the people around you who are actually there and know what's going on and know both sides of the story and that care about you and love you, and not just an earthly love, but a spiritual Christ-like love, because they are going to want what's best for you.
One other thought that I had when you were talking just a second ago was watching us, the three of us, watching you go through that relationship was really scary the older you got, because
Yes, it was.
just because we knew if you end up marrying him, he will take you away. And not that we would ever see you again, but just the way that he would manipulate and isolate you was also really scary. And so, and then in my situation, with my ex just wanting to sleep with me, didn't get to, but when he left the college, he dropped out right after we broke up, and big shocker there. Was a horrible student too, by the way. But he has had, 3 girlfriends since then. And I've heard from other people, slept with all of them. And then he had a baby with his last girlfriend. And so, not that necessarily would have been me, but and not that necessarily would have been you, but just what we were getting into and the way that they acted, and just the direction they would have taken us had we stayed any longer. It doesn't matter how bad the relationship has gone or how long it's lasted, 9 months, 7 years. It doesn't matter. It's still okay to get out of it, and it's never too late to say no.
So true.
Yeah, I struggled a lot, and I think I told all of you that at one point. Was like, I've invested so much time in this person. I feel like I'm burning 7 years of my life to the ground, and that's hard.
And for me, it felt like, well, was this all for nothing then? I can't say no now. But you can, and you will be stronger because of it, even though you don't feel like it in the moment.
Well, I also think when you get in a good place, you're with someone who you have 1,000% confidence that the Lord brought this person into your life, and you look back to that part of your life, you're like, you're so much more grateful that you got through it and you left than you ever were afraid staying in it.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, people really need to think about that. The fear you're feeling may be so overpowering to the point you feel ill or like you can't live anymore. But when you get out of that and you realize the stronghold that person had on you, and you are in a so much better place, and you don't have that dependency on anyone like you used to have, you are so much more free mentally, spiritually, emotionally, that one person does not wreck your entire life. And you're in such a better place. And you can actually live life in the best way possible.
I would also like to say that when you are ready to get out of that hurtful relationship, that wrong relationship, that abusive, whatever it is, when you're ready to get out of that, turn to those people who have been speaking truth into your life, because they are the ones who love you, who care about you, who stay up night after night praying for you, and they want you to be in a better place.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And also, not only that, but just very quickly, I never felt before I ended that relationship that there was ever going to be a good time. So do not wait for the perfect time to end the relationship.
I agree.
It doesn't matter if you guys are in the best place you've ever been, or if you're fighting, or if you're kind of on rocky roads. Just, you have to end it. Because I never felt like there was a right moment until eventually it happened. And after that, I thought, wow, I was never going to get out of that if I just kept lying to myself. So don't lie to yourself, and don't wait for the perfect moment, because there will never be a perfect moment. Sorry. there just will never be a perfect moment to end that relationship. So when you feel like you are confident enough to stand on your 2 feet, that's when you do it. Because there's never going to be that moment of shining like, oh yes, right now, I'm going to do it right now. No, it's rip the Band-Aid off kind of thing.
Exactly. And I felt that way when my relationship ended, because that summer a really close friend of mine committed suicide. And so I did not want to deal with his fits and drama and whatever. And so I just tried to get as much space as I possibly could. But I knew I cannot drag this out forever.
Yeah.
Like, even though I'm dealing with this shock and grief and everything over my friend, you know, but I don't know when to leave, you know, because like you said, there was never a right time. And so I think.
And you want to wait for the perfect time.
Right. And I think the Lord brought that specific situation with that other girl out into the open to where it was really easy to walk away.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What the Lord has brought us through.
Yes.
That's all I can say.
But you know what? One thing is, he was always a constant.
Yes, he was.
And we have all been through the ringer.
And back again.
Yeah, and back again. But he was always the thing that was the most consistent.
Yes.
Always.
Yeah.
And
he
when has he ever lied?
He's
When
never
has-
left you.
When
He
has he ever
never
turned his
left
back?
you. Yeah.
Not ever. So just remember that too. You know, he was there for you before this relationship. He's been there with you during, and he'll be with you after.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we could talk for much longer. But that's all the time we have for today. But thank you guys so much for joining us and for being such an encouragement to me over the years. You guys have been sent from God in so many different ways into my life and just have helped write my story. And I'm so thankful that you guys have befriended me and chose to, you know, stick around through most of the craziness. But it's been really wonderful getting to see God's grace and mercy in each of our lives. And yeah, but also a big thank you to those listening to the podcast today. I hope you were encouraged and will join us next time as you fearlessly pursue your calling.